well. So I'll do a quick intro on myself, and then I'll let my partners here introduce themselves. My name's Owen Schwaegerle. I'm a real estate broker, third generation, and my wife and I started our own independent real estate brokerage right here on the Central Coast. We are the Schwaegerle Real Estate Team, and we're really passionate about education and empowerment, and our goal is to help right there. That's our mission statement, to connect with individuals to achieve their real estate dreams, experience financial freedom, and love where they live. And so we'll be sharing how we can help you do that through these wealth building pillars. Go ahead.
I'm Kyle Johnson. I'm a state planning attorney here in San Luis Obispo, and we have a Santa Maria office as well. And I also just enjoy providing education to people because it's an important part of everybody's life and something that everyone needs to have and most people don't have. So I'm excited to share some information with you guys.
Thank you all for coming. My name is Corban Lethcoe. I'm a financial advisor on the Central Coast. I work for Raymond James English Wealth Management, and I'm really excited to do this workshop, partnering with these great gentlemen here. I think my team and I at Raymond James, we've seen a lot of gaps in financial planning, and when I was talking with Owen, he was really forward-looking on wanting to provide more community education, and we met Kyle recently through the chamber, and it just seemed like a really natural connection. We all work in similar areas. There's a lot of overlap between our professions, and wanting to provide a space where we could talk about these topics together and in a way to provide education for the community. So we're really excited to talk about this and be here today.
Okay. All right, y'all. So let's get started with the wealth building workshop. That's who we are. That's my wife, Camille. She's not here today. She's home with the kids. We've got 3 kids now, 3 years and under. So, okay, let's start by defining some terms. Okay, what is wealth? Because wealth building, right? Sounds cool. Let's actually explain what we're talking about here. So the best definition of wealth, this is the one I really resonate with. I like this definition because it's not just a number. It's really about the freedom that wealth provides. So this comes from Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money. He says the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want. That is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays. So imagine living a life where you had so much financial security, so much financial abundance and peace that statement were true. You could do whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, for however long you wanted, with whoever you wanted. That is, in my opinion, like the best, highest, ultimate aim of what wealth can do for you. So what is wealth? I mean, if you break it down to like a number, it's oftentimes equated to your net worth. And net worth equals your assets minus your liabilities. So we'll go into that and explaining how you build your assets, how you remove your liabilities, getting out of debt, paying down debt, and building your wealth. And so there's a few different vehicles that we'll explore, and some other forms of wealth here. They're explained. Financial wealth, right? There's cash, investments, stock, retirement accounts, your real assets. That's like your real estate, your home, your investment property. And then human capital. You know, those are your forms of wealth, things you get better with over time. And then freedom of time freedom. That's like the true finite resource. We only have 24 hours a day. So how can you make the most out of it? Okay, so what is wealth? The net worth tracker. This is something that really set me up for success. There was this course that my wife and I did called Win, Make, Give. It's a free course online. You can sign up for this. There's a podcast. It's like an 8-week series, and they have a workbook you can print out, and it's got a bunch of cool tools in there. And one of the best things, this really set us up, was this spreadsheet. It's called the like net worth tracker spreadsheet. So here's an example of what it looks like. And what's really cool is if you guys are interested, we can get you this Excel spreadsheet. You can just have this copy, and then you can start tracking your own net worth. So what's great about it is it breaks out everything from cash to investments to real estate, and then that's all your assets, then your liabilities down here, and then your net worth. And so starting month 1, where are you today? That's really helpful to see, like, where am I at today? And then it break it out monthly. So you could do this update like once a month as you start to track your net worth and see where you're going. And it's really fun to do. The first time I did it, I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then you get excited about paying down your loans and putting more money in investments. And then you see your money grow each month. And so this is totally free. This is something that you'll get if you want. We can email this to you afterwards. Just make sure we have a copy of your email address, and then you can start tracking your net worth. Okay, so why does this even matter? Like, why does wealth, net worth, who even cares, right? It's just a number. Well, it does matter because wealth creates financial stability for you, for your family. It gives you less stress, less burden of debt and student debt and housing costs. And this can actually help set your family up for future generations. Like if you build wealth correctly, like we're going to talk about tonight, you can pass down all your hard work, all your sweat equity, all the things that you did, the sacrifices you made. You can pass that down to give your children, your grandchildren, your loved ones a leg up in life. And it's a launch pad, not just a ladder to start climbing. So I think about my grandpa Woody, who my middle namesake is Woodrow after my grandpa Woody, Woodrow Fair from back in the 1930s. He was in Nebraska about in the Dust Bowl era, and there was just no real hope, no real prosperity going on in the Dust Bowl. So he decided to migrate to California. And so he left, he came out west, and he came to the Golden State looking for opportunity. And then he met my grandma. She was a Rosie the Riveter during World War II. And so this is like 1938. He came to California. He saw them building the Golden Gate Bridge. And then 1940s, he meets my grandma, and they got married after World War II, and then had my aunts, uncles, and my mom. And so through my grandparents, their hard work, their hustle, their sacrifice, they were able to go into business, and they opened up a Foster Freeze, and they were just schlepping ice cream and hot dogs all day long till late in the night in Oakland, California, which wasn't really safe. They actually got robbed at gunpoint a couple of times. And so they worked hard pursuing the American dream. And what they did, their first home they bought was a duplex. They basically started house hacking back in the 1940s, before house hacking was even a term, before it was even cool. They lived in one unit, rented the other units out, and were able to start building an investment portfolio that way. And through their hard work, their sacrifice, their investments, it was able to help send me to college debt-free. And I look to my grandparents and I thank God for them every day because of the hard work, the sacrifices that they made. My life is so different because of my grandparents on both sides, but particularly Grandpa Woody and Grandma Belta. All right, so this is a really fascinating statistic. This shows how Americans build wealth by like percentile. So if you look at the net worth of Americans, here's the bottom 50%, and it breaks it down to what their net worth is held in as a percentage of their total net worth. And real estate makes up about 49% of the net worth of the bottom 50% of Americans. And then you go up to the tiers 50 to 90% of the wealthiest Americans, 39% of their net worth is invested in real estate. So between that 90% of Americans have the majority of their net worth invested in real estate. Once you get up to like the top 10%, you see that pensions and corporate equities funds, businesses, and then like Bezos, right? All their money is invested in the stocks of their companies and that kind of thing. But even for the ultra wealthy, 9% of their wealth is still held in real estate, which shows that real estate is a great wealth building tool for the majority of Americans because of some of the core principles that build wealth over time. And then this data is really fascinating to me. This is from the National Association of Realtors. They do a study of the median net worth across renters and homeowners. And as of last year, 2025, median net worth of a renter was $10,000. Median net worth of a homeowner was $430,000. So as you can see, the homeowner's net worth is 43 times that of the renters, which means they have more options, more opportunities to liquidate that and live off that, to trade that. And that's the financial freedom and investing possibilities that it affords them. Hey, Christian, welcome in. Hey, sorry. There's a chair right here and you can grab some snacks. Got some pasta and salad and sandwiches right there. Okay, so why buy real estate? I love showing this graphic. That you've probably seen this before if you've been around me for a while. But the median sales price of a home going back to 1960 was $17,000. Can you imagine buying a house and
A car for that today.
median sales price was $17,000? And that's when my grandparents started buying real estate in the Bay Area. And they paid that or less for homes in the Bay Area in Oakland, California. And so because real estate is like the longer you hold it, the better you do over time. The median price of a home nationwide is $400,000. We're on the Central Coast. We're at actually $950,000 right now. So we're more than double the national average. So, and the other thing too is, real estate's been a very stable and secure asset. If you look at these gray bars, these are periods of recession. And look how real estate fares well during periods of recession. We had the '08 crisis where there was an oversupply of housing, a lot of bad loans. People couldn't afford to buy anything. And so inventory sat for years and prices plummeted. However, look at for the rest of that time, real estate has been super stable. What does a stock chart look like during that time? Right? Up and down, volatility. So real estate gives you a secure wealth building over time strategy. It's a tangible asset. It's, build your sweat equity. You can fix it up yourself. You own the asset, you control it. Whereas stocks, index funds, you don't get to control as much of that. Then there's cash flow. If you keep the property as a rental, you can actually rent it out and generate income on it. And then there's appreciation. So you get that market appreciation, which also benefits due to leverage. So for example, let's say you bought a $500,000 house. You don't have to put $500,000 down on it. You could do 10% down. And that's $50,000. But the asset goes up, let's say 5% that year, up to a value of $525,000. Well, your $50,000 down payment, you experience $25,000 in appreciation. That's almost like a 50% return on your down payment within the first year. So if you look into leverage is a great way to build real estate while owning that stable asset. Then there's the tax benefits, depreciation, tax write-offs. Your interest is tax deductible. So there's all these things that are working for you. Plus, real estate is a hedge against inflation. So in this era right here, 2020, 33% of all bills in circulation were printed after COVID. And look, real estate literally went up 33%, just like that, because real estate is a hedge against inflation. Okay, so this is another chart I share quite frequently. It shows you homes built versus population growth. So this is when my grandparents got married in the 40s, and then they started having their kids. The boomer generation doubled the population growth that decade. And then we had 20 plus million kids born per decade. So the country started growing, and they were building houses to keep up with it, all until the 2010s when we had a 20 million housing unit gap. And we're still feeling the pains of that today. Plus, land, labor, lumber, land costs. It's not getting any cheaper on the coast to buy the land that's there because it's a limited resource. Then you've got labor costs have gone up 4.4% just in the last year. And then lumber costs, during COVID, prices spiked so dramatically, but now they've come back down, but they're still a lot higher due to inflation. So all of these things, land, labor, lumber, pushing up real estate prices, meaning it is still a good investment. Now, oftentimes we hear, oh, I can't buy real estate. It's so expensive. I've been there. My wife and I, we were first-time home buyers once upon a time, and we were like, how can anyone buy property on the Central Coast? It's so expensive. Well, we didn't buy a traditional home. We actually bought a fourplex. So we lived in the smallest unit, and we rented the other units out, and it actually paid our mortgage. So another thing, too, people want turnkey, move-in ready. If you're willing to put in some sweat equity, you could build wealth quicker because other buyers aren't willing to do it. And so here's the before and after pictures of the unit that we lived in. My wife had one criteria. It needed to be cute. So we had to gut the carpet, put in new countertops, paint everything, new tile shower, make it look really cute. And we did it. And it took time. It took a little bit of sweat equity and some investment, but it looked a lot better. And here's one of the other units that we had fixed up and rented out. It was pretty old, pretty dated, but then fresh paint, fresh flooring goes a long way. And so you can build wealth quicker than you think when doing some investing. Okay, another free giveaway if you guys want. I have a deal analyzer. This is a really cool spreadsheet that I use with the help of some information I got from Bigger Pockets, which is a real estate investing podcast I've listened to. And this is a really cool spreadsheet. So you can put in the cost of your purchase for an investment property, the down payment amount, you can put in the interest rate, the term of the loan, what your rents will be, and then it will basically do a 10-year projection to kind of cast forward how much wealth you could expect to build during your hold period, which is really cool. So all your costs here from property taxes, insurance, management, maintenance, landscape, water, all that's broken out. And so I just plugged in the numbers from our fourplex purchase that we bought as a first home. Camille was 23. I was 25 when we got into our first home. And it was like, we were actually like pocketing like $51 a month if you factored in, you know, what the cost was for it, like everything. So it basically paid for itself entirely. So, and then the other thing is principal pay down. So, okay, this is really cool. I'll just show you the spreadsheet. Here's where it pulls from. Has anyone seen a loan amortization schedule before? Okay, so I used to be a financial analyst. I worked at a commercial real estate bank. And so here's a spreadsheet that I got while I was working at the bank. And this is where the kind of the secret of money making is in real estate is the principal pay down. And the longer you own real estate, the more principal you pay towards it. Is everyone familiar with this concept? So you pay $3,800 a month for your mortgage. However, not all of that mortgage goes away. Like if you pay rent, that money's gone. You don't get any return on that. But the cool thing is the principal, $555 a month of that payment is going towards principal. And it's almost like a forced savings plan. It's like your house is a piggy bank and you're being forced to put money into that investment every single month. Whereas if you rent, yes, you could potentially save that money and invest it in some sort of index fund or get a return on it. You have to have an extreme amount of discipline though, and consistency to make sure that you get that savings benefit of renting versus owning. Not everyone has that. Whereas if you have a mortgage, it's going to force you to put that money away. And then the interest portion is tax deductible. So that's where you get some extra benefits. So two spreadsheets you can get from us if you'd like. And then some wealth building strategies. And we'll pivot to the financial advisor here next. Okay, buy and hold. I'm a classic buy and hold real estate investor. My wife and I, we still own our fourplex. We were able to save up enough to go buy our next property. And we've been able to build up a rental portfolio by following the buy and hold strategy. And the beauty of it is rents go up over time, but your mortgage is fixed. So at some point, that fixed cost, as your rents go up, is going to increase your cash flow. So that's the real beauty of it. Plus, you get the ability to pay it down over time. House hacking, live in one unit, rent the others out. My wife and I are still house hacking. Our property has a garage conversion we made and we rent that out. So it's like you can do this even at a different stage in your life. I like to say there's like a sliding scale of comfort versus profit and cost. And like when we were young, before we had kids, it was like, who cares about comfort? Let's just go and be super profitable, live in the smallest unit. It was a 1-bed, 1-bath, 490 square foot apartment. Probably not a good idea today with 3 kids, but back then it made sense. And so where do you fit today on your cost versus comfort scale? And can you maybe afford to sacrifice some of your comforts for more profit? Maybe you rent out a room. Maybe you build an ADU, convert the garage. Maybe you do something where you sacrifice, but then it pulls in $2,000 a month in passive income. Okay, so if you don't have access to cash, what do? Some things you can do if you own real estate is you can do a cash out refinance and pull equity out of your home. You can do a HELOC, like a line of credit, where you borrow against your equity on demand, but you keep your first note. So if you have a low interest rate and you don't want to give that up, you don't have to get rid of that. You can actually do a second note with a line of credit. You have to do it smart because you don't want to run up a bunch of debt and not be able to pay it back quickly. But it could be used as leverage to get you into a new investment property or home, or even to build an ADU. And then 1031 exchange, you can always sell your property via a 1031 exchange roll it into a new property, and pay no capital gains tax. So that's another benefit. Or live and flip. If you live in a property for 2 years, you can sell it capital gains tax free for up to $500K as a married couple or $250K as an individual. And then just portfolio snowball. Just like if you bought a few rental properties every year or every couple of years, within 10 years, you could have quite a portfolio that builds wealth for you. And then you can retire and have some of that more freedom, which will have. And if you want to learn more about that strategy that we've done, you can scan this QR code. This will take you to our YouTube page. Please subscribe. We're putting out content all the time. We have the Happy House Hacking podcast to help educate more people on how to house hack their way to financial freedom. And we also have the Love Where You Live show, which is a new series we put out on YouTube where we're featuring different neighborhoods and communities in SLO County. We just dropped one on Santa Margarita, the cute town. So follow us, subscribe, and check out the Schwaegerle team on YouTube.
All right. Thank you, Owen, for that great introduction. And thank you all again for being here. So Owen gave a great overview of real estate as a wealth building tool. And I work as a financial advisor, and I work with families, individuals, businesses to make financial plans that make sense for them. So here on the Central Coast, primarily we're working with pre-retirees, retirees, business owners, companies, and a lot of that revolves around creating the right plan for them. So I want you all to walk away with 3 things today. And the first one is clarity on what financial planning actually is. Some of you may have a financial advisor, maybe you know a financial advisor, but I want to be really clear from my perspective on what financial planning is, and it might not be exactly what you think. I also want to be really clear about how each of our topics tonight, Owen, Kyle's, and mine, all interrelate and how they work together, because real estate, financial planning, and estate planning really aren't separate decisions, because decisions in one are going to have ripple effects that move into the others as well. And I don't want to leave you all with a few things that you can do this week, concrete things, no cost to you. Maybe it takes 20 or 30 minutes of your time, and Owen kind of hinted at some of these ideas already in his part. But I think that it will help contextualize where you are today and what your financial circumstances currently look like. So from my experience, most people make decisions in silos. You buy an investment property over here, maybe you open up a 401k, select some funds there, and then maybe at some point you're sitting down with an attorney and you're creating a will or a trust. And those are all really important, great things to do. But the challenge is, if each of those are decisions in a vacuum, you run the risk of maybe a gap in coordination. If you buy an investment property, you're going to want to make sure you update your insurance for it. If you create a trust, you want to make sure that all the beneficiary designations are updated for your right accounts. And if you are maxing out your employer plan, maybe it's 401k, a 457, maybe a 403b, and it's all pre-tax dollars, it could be worth having somebody take a look and make sure that there aren't other account types that could save you more in taxes down the road. So when all of these decisions happen separately, maybe there are different professionals who aren't coordinating well, there could be gaps that come up. And I think it's really important to be mindful of the gaps that could come up in your financial planning, because a good financial plan will highlight the gaps, show you where you are, and show you exactly what you need to fill them. I like to think of a financial plan as a blueprint. It's a blueprint where everything works together. Think of it kind of as your financial North Star. Maybe you're going on a road trip with some friends, for example, and let's say you're planning a road trip and one of your friends books the hotel, one of your friends, plans the route, how you're going to travel there, but they never talk to each other. And then eventually you go on the road trip and you're going to end up somewhere, but it's probably not where you're going to want to be. And that's very similar to your financial life, in the sense that when you are making decisions separately, you're not going to get exactly where you want to be, or there might be some gaps in your planning that could create some problems down the road. So these are 5 areas that I think are essential for financial planning. And I think when people hear financial advisor, they think stock picker or market predictor, or tell me what to do with my investments. And investments are a key component of your financial plan. But really, I think financial planning boils down to the one question on the screen. Like, given everything I have and everything that I want, am I going to be okay? Will I be able to use my resources to get where I want to go? And I think to answer that question well, you really need to have an eye towards these 5 pieces right here. So for the investment piece, it's really, are your savings allocated? And are they allocated in a way that's aligned with your risk profile? Are they aligned with the stage of your life, with your goals, what you're trying to do, your legacy considerations? These are all key components there too, especially for people who are maybe big savers in employer plans. It's really important to check to see what investments are in the plan itself. I've met with a lot of clients. I'll give you an example. My team and I, we met with a dentist recently. They own a practice up in Atascadero, and we were doing a portfolio review for them, and they gave us copies of their 401k statements, and they've had all the great financial habits. They've been good savers, contributed yearly to their plan, but they set up the fund lineup, so how their funds were actually invested decades ago, and they've never really changed it since. So when we were doing the portfolio review for them, we were able to really highlight, well, these were the funds you used. Are you aware of the costs internal to the funds? That's a really key part that I see a lot of gaps in, is that people don't always know the expense ratios for their funds. And especially if you have a 401k or a 403b, a lot of clients, a lot of people I talk to think that, oh, it's just free. My employer takes care of it. And that might not be the full story. And some of those funds may have higher costs than you think. And it's not a bad thing at all to pay for funds. It's good to pay for the right funds, but have awareness over what the performance of the funds looks like versus what the costs are. Those are really key considerations as well. On the insurance piece, this is something that comes up a lot when we have conversations around retirement planning, around longevity. People are living longer now. It's really important to have conversations around long-term care. Especially, I've seen a lot of gaps in insurance and maybe underinsurance for individuals who are the sole breadwinner of their family. Maybe they're a business owner and they want to make sure that in case something happens, whether a family member dies or whether they get in an accident, that their family's going to be okay. And I think if you have an insurance policy, it'd be smart to have that be reviewed every so often as well, and make sure that you don't have any insurance coverage gaps for your circumstances. The third piece here is income. And I see income investments as 2 sides of the same coin. And income is really your cash flow in retirement. For a lot of our clients, they've been great savers. They've accumulated a lot of assets, and they have all the right habits to build wealth. But when you enter that pre-retirement, retirement phase, it turns to a distribution game. And that's a very different set of rules to do that one well. And it relates really specifically here to the tax strategy piece as well. But your income in retirement is going to be made up of Social Security. Who knows what the future of Social Security is going to look like? But for now, that's part of the conversations, and those could change over time. Pensions, if you have a pension, annuity, and then the assets that you've built up and saved over time. Specifically on the income piece is you've built up the assets and now you have to withdraw the assets too. And especially if most of your assets have been saved in an employer plan, when you go to retire, you'll roll that into a traditional IRA, and then eventually you'll pay taxes when you withdraw the funds. And I think this is where the tax strategy becomes so key. And I am so surprised that the conversations I have with people, when I ask people who I know who have financial advisors or anybody that I know, the amount of people who have never given their financial professional a copy of their tax return is alarmingly high. And I think that is a really big gap in financial planning, that if your financial professional is not asking for your tax return, there's a really big missed opportunity there, because your tax return is one of the most important financial documents in your life. And it provides a lot of strong planning opportunities. On that piece, for example, how many people here know about tax loss harvesting? Anybody hear about tax loss harvesting? Maybe a couple people in the crowd. Basically is the idea that you have a taxable brokerage account, something that's not a retirement account, and you book some losses. You sell a stock, maybe you bought Apple, and it was $200 and now it's $150, and you decide that you want to sell it. You can book the loss, and booking the loss has some tax benefits. You can reduce your taxable income by a certain amount by realizing tax losses. How many people here have ever heard about tax gains harvesting, capital gains harvesting? Anybody here? Kyle, sharp guy, I'm sure he knows about it. But the idea is, for a lot of our clients, they might be, if you are in certain marginal brackets, you have 0% federal capital gains tax. And that is a really powerful tool. A lot of people don't talk about it, but it is such a hidden gem for tax strategy. We were meeting with some couples towards the year end, and they have a modest income. I want to say if you're married filing jointly and your taxable income's under maybe $98,000, somewhere in that range, this could be really applicable to you. And this happens a lot for clients who are maybe newly retired, their income's different, maybe they're just cash flowing based off of Social Security and pensions, and then they have more modest income streams at the moment. We were able to realize a certain amount of gains for this client at a 0% capital gains. And this is really important because that gives clients cash flow that allows them to go on a trip with their loved ones, that allows them to do some year-end gifting if they like. And it was something that a lot of people don't realize or take advantage of. And I think the tax strategy really becomes strong with Roth conversions as well. If you aren't familiar with that idea, but it's basically the idea that you take your pre-tax dollars, you convert them to Roth dollars, you pay the taxes now at your known tax rates. And doing so can be a really smart move because now you have Roth dollars. Roth dollars are tax-free when you withdraw them. You never have to, there's no required distribution that comes up in retirement that comes if you have a traditional IRA. And it is a really powerful tool. And specifically, we worked with a client towards the year end as well. He and his wife had a lot of medical deductions. They had some health complications last year, and they were itemizing close to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 of medical deductions last year. It was a golden opportunity to take the husband's high dollar retirement account and convert that into Roth dollars. He pays the taxes now, but it was at a much lower rate. I want to say it was around 10 to 12% that he was paying on that conversion there. So that's the key piece of really being mindful of your tax situation. And I think that's where there's a lot of gaps in financial planning, is that most advisors don't have these conversations. And part of that is an industry, maybe there's some compliance overhangs at certain firms, but really your tax return is a financial goldmine of planning opportunities. And I think that more and more it's going to become a focus in the years ahead. And then the last piece here is estate planning. And I'll let Kyle tee up most of that for his portion here. But really, it's just making sure that your assets are flowing in the ways that you want them to, that the people you love are planned for, provided for, and that there's a plan in place for your legacy. I think these are the key elements of financial planning. It's so much more than just portfolio management. It's so much more than just risk allocation. It really has an eye towards all of these different areas here. And I think that a really strong financial planner, that any planner you go to, will be able to make sure that all of these are covered and talked about and discussed. So how this all connects. So Owen talked a lot about real estate, right? If you buy a home, you have a mortgage on it, your mortgage affects your cash flow. Your cash flow is going to affect how much you can save in retirement. All of that is going to be a ripple effect into your future spending down the road, right? We have some of our clients who are business owners. Maybe some of you are interested in starting a business or know somebody in your life who has a business. The entity structure is super important for that as well, right? LLC versus an S Corp, very different considerations there, and the tax treatment is different as well. And a lot of our conversations with our business owners clients starts around the retirement plan design too, right? Sometimes that's designing a 401k, sometimes that's a simple IRA, sometimes that's a sub IRA. There's some nuance between each one. Each one has different benefits for your tax situation. So I think that's where it matters too, right? How your energy structure affects your taxes as well. And you maybe have a business that has to have some succession planning in place. There's, Owen talked about loan amortization and being able to write off certain real estate. That's really relevant if you are owning and operating a business too. And then just generally planning for retirement, right? When you retire affects your Social Security timeline. A lot of our clients that we meet with or people that we talk to, we recently were talking to a family who is planning on retiring soon, and they just assume they should claim Social Security when they turn 62. And that is one option to do so. But we were able to kind of show them different Social Security optimizations, right? Maybe the husband claims at 65, but maybe the wife claims at 67. And these types of conversations really depend on, well, what do you want your cash flow to look like? And what's the change in benefits? Because I think we all know that the longer we wait to claim Social Security, the more benefits you have in lifetime spending. But that isn't always the best plan for people. Sometimes people want to claim earlier because they want to retire soon and they're willing to forego some of those benefits. But it's having these conversations to be able to really know when the best time to claim is and how that affects when you want to retire. I think those are really important to talk about as well. And I think a strong financial planner is somebody who's able to see how all these pieces fit together. One thing to do this week, Owen talked about this too, but a net worth snapshot, I think that's a great idea, right? Line down the middle, what you own, what you owe, write it all down. Anything in your life that has monetary value, homes, cars, savings accounts. I think that if you haven't done intake on what your current net worth is, it's really important to do so because that is where you're starting from. That's home base, right? And I think doing that is a really important exercise. And sometimes you might have an idea in your head, but when you go through the exact details, the numbers might be slightly different. If you do a financial plan, this will be a key component that a financial advisor would talk about. And the other thing that I would encourage you all to do is look at your current investments, whether that's your current brokerage account, whether that's your employer plan, see what funds you own in there. And then also see what the expense ratio is on those funds. And it might be different than what you think it is. I would say anything that's between 0.5% to 1% is worth taking a second look. It could be, I would just pause, right? Just see what that is. Because I've seen great funds that are charging 1% that have really strong performance. And I would tell somebody, you should keep that fund. So in addition, if you're doing an expense ratio analysis, I think the next step would also be look at peer performance, right? If you own a specific fund, see how it compares relative to its peers. Sometimes a fund that is charging more is actually best in class. It's much stronger than its peers. These are conversations that we like to have with our clients too, about being able to see, yes, you are paying this for your fund, and yeah, it's a little bit higher than average, but also this is a really strong manager. They have a really strong history of outperformance. It's worth keeping. Or on the flip side, yeah, you're paying close to 1% for a fund that's really lagged relative to its peers. This is an opportunity to be improved on. So I think both of those would be really strong ideas on what you can do this week to understand what your current financial situation looks like. And here's my contact information here, and I'd be happy to talk with anybody one-on-one. I think Kyle, I'll tap him in to talk more about estate planning and how good estate planning is such an important piece of your overall financial picture, and it makes sure that everything you have, everything you own, handles exactly how you'd like it to be. So, after you, Kyle.
Right.
Oh, bathroom?
Oh, bathroom? Yeah, hold on.
All right. So I'm talking about estate planning. So as I mentioned, I'm an estate planning attorney here in San Luis Obispo, and I have an office in Santa Maria. And so we're going to be talking kind of generally about estate planning. I will kind of caveat with, I'm not giving anyone specific legal advice. If you have specific legal questions, we can talk afterwards and set up a time to talk in more detail. But generally speaking, most people know about estate planning, but they may not know the specifics, and there's generally a lot of misconceptions about estate planning. So we will start with, here's the couple things that I'm going to be talking about today. So number one is why we need an estate plan. In my opinion, everybody needs some form of an estate plan. Some of them are more complex than others, just really depends on your financial situation and family situation. But we'll talk about why estate planning matters. We'll talk about some of those common misconceptions that people have about estate planning. We'll talk about what happens when you do not have an estate plan. That's an important aspect because if you know what happens if you don't have a plan, you'll understand why you need a plan, right? Um, we'll go over the key documents in estate planning. So most people have heard of wills and trusts and things of that nature. So we'll talk about those main planning documents. Then we'll talk about common pitfalls to avoid and some of the situations that come up in estate planning in general. And then talk about how the estate planning process works. So a lot of people get overwhelmed by, I need all of this, I know I need all of this, but I don't know where to start, and I don't know who to talk to, and attorneys are scary, and all those types of things, right? So the estate planning attorneys are the good ones, I promise. We'll talk about that plan, and then talk over a few frequently asked questions. Oftentimes I get the same questions, so I'll touch on a couple of those, and then open it up to Q&A if you guys have any specifics. So first and foremost, why estate planning matters. So in order to answer the why, I like to help you guys understand the what. So first and foremost, what is estate planning? So estate planning in general is organizing your legal, financial, and health related matters, basically to ensure that your wishes are honored in the way that you want them honored, right? So that both talks about during your lifetime, if there's a potential for incapacity or things of that nature, and then also upon your passing, are your wishes met in those ways? And as part of estate planning, oftentimes people ask about what is my estate. Basically, it's everything you own. Owen talked a little bit about this, right? There's all those financial different areas, but the estate plan covers not only what you own, but what you want to do with it, right? And finally, the why. So obviously the main reason is to protect yourself and to protect your loved ones, right? We'll talk in a little bit about it's not only transfers upon death, but ensuring that during your lifetime you are protected, or you and your spouse, but also protecting your kids and next beneficiaries. Then having control over your assets. So we'll talk in a little bit about what happens when you don't have a plan. Your assets will go somewhere, right? But it may not be where you want them to go. So if you want to control that, the way in which you do it is through the estate planning process. And then we'll talk in more detail in a little bit about probate, but that's kind of the trigger word or the red flag people often hear about. We want to avoid probate. It's not a fun process. And then, as I mentioned, talking about incapacity planning as well, right? So we're planning for incapacity. We're also planning for when ultimately we pass. So common misconceptions. So these are a couple that I hear all the time. One of the most common ones is I'm too young to need estate planning. In my opinion, everyone needs an estate plan. Basically, as soon as you turn 18, usually there's a need for having some type of healthcare directive or things of that nature. A common thing that I get is, and this happened actually with my sibling, when she went to college, she was 18 and she was in the hospital. And my dad called the hospital to talk and see what was going on. And they basically said, we can't tell you any information. Your daughter's an adult, you don't have any rights. There's no healthcare directive. So we'll talk about the need for that, even with young people. But the I'm too young often comes up even when you have older people. So my father-in-law, I pushed him to do his estate plan for like 5 years. And I would do it for free for him, right? And I'm too young. I don't need that. That's for old people. I finally got it done, but I hear that a lot. Then estate planning is only for the rich. So this is a big misconception because depending on what you consider rich, right? Every person that has any level of wealth should have some type of plan. Even if you don't have any money, you need to make sure that, hey, I get to a point who I want to make healthcare related decisions and things of that nature. But in California, basically, if you own a piece of real estate, you need a trust, right? If you have a brokerage account, you need a trust. So we'll talk about why that's important there. And then the last one that I hear quite a bit is, well, I have a will, so that should be enough. And that's a big misconception in California. If you have a will, yes, you have met some of the needs of an estate plan, getting to a point who you want to be in charge and where things go. But we still get dragged into the probate court process more likely than not. And we'll talk about how to avoid that and why you need a trust. And then the last one, I saw this online, which I thought was funny, that the state's going to handle everything. I don't know if anyone actually thinks that the state is going to handle everything. I will tell you they will not. And it will cost a whole bunch of time and headache and money for your kids if you don't have a plan in place. Okay, so what happens if we don't have a plan, right? So some of you might have some form of a plan, some of you might not have any at all. And so I'll touch on a couple things that happen. I'll start here in the middle because this is kind of the most common and the biggest issue with not having a plan. So if someone passes away with no plan in place, they pass away under what's called intestate succession. So basically that means, hey, I have no plan in place. California has some default laws on where my assets will go, who's entitled to be in charge, things of that nature. The problem with it is basically that process is governed by the California court system. As you can imagine, the court system is not an efficient process. It costs a whole bunch of time, costs a whole bunch of money. So I've gone through probates where everyone agrees, everyone's on the same page. It's still going to take a year to 2 years to get through. And it's going to cost upwards of $15,000 to $25,000 to get through, right? So not an efficient process at all. Then that's kind of the process at death, is going through the probate court process. There's also issues with during your lifetime. If you become incapacitated or a parent of yours becomes incapacitated, right, and they can't make financial decisions for themselves and they can't make healthcare related decisions, if they don't have a plan in place, well, who makes those decisions? Well, if you have nothing in place, again, you go to the court system and you go through what's called a conservatorship, which is a nightmare to go through. It costs a whole bunch of money. It's basically a process where the court will give you permission to make decisions on behalf of your parent or your spouse or whatever the case may be. But you can do it in a much more efficient way, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then finally, the other issue with not having an estate plan is maybe I don't get to direct where my assets go, right? So it's not uncommon that most people, right, want everything to go equally to their kids. And that is the default rule under California law, subject to a couple of exceptions. So ultimately, when you go through probate court, oftentimes it gets to that end result. But again, that time and that money and that headache ends up eating up a lot of the benefit. But it might be that you want some things to go to grandkids, or you want things to go to charity, or you have a certain child that shouldn't have assets because of special needs issues or creditor issues or gambling issues, whatever. I've seen it all, right? So ultimately, not having a plan forces you into court. You deal with a whole bunch of headache and time, and ultimately, you don't have control over where your assets go. So let's talk about the plan itself, right? So when we're talking about estate planning, there are 4 key documents. There are many others that kind of round out the plan, but these are the 4 main ones that everyone should have. So first and foremost, we'll talk about the trust. So a common question I get is, what's the difference between a revocable and a living trust, or a revocable and an irrevocable trust? So I'll touch on that first. So revocable and living trust are just interchangeable terms. Basically, it's the trust that 99% of people set up. And the revocable part of it means as long as I'm alive and have capacity, I can change and modify the trust terms, right? So if I set it up and I say, hey, my brother's in charge, 10 years later, when I have some kids that are old enough, I can change that and say, actually, my kids are going to be in charge now, right? So that revocability is what that key term is. So ultimately, the trust is the main document as part of your estate plan. And the goal is that, hey, when we set this trust up, we get to appoint who's in charge, right? So I get to say, if I become unable to make decisions for myself, here are the parties that I appoint to make those decisions for me. You get to outline the guidelines of those decisions, right? So they have to use the assets for my benefit, and then it transfers to the kids, right? So you get to control not only the management during your lifetime if you're incapacitated, but ultimately the distribution plan upon your passing. And a couple key things there. I won't go into too much detail, but you have a lot of control over the distribution plan. And so one of the things when I talked about probate, I said ultimately it will end up going to the kids. But there may be situations where it shouldn't go out to the kids right away, right? So if the kids are younger, you don't want a 5-year-old inheriting $50,000 in cash, right? You want that managed for them and have somebody to be able to pay bills for them on their behalf, maybe up to a certain age, right? And you get to choose those age restrictions, what the cash can be used for, how it's invested, etc. So that's kind of the main points of the trust, right? The trust gets to say, here's who's in charge, here's where things go, and the big thing, we stay out of probate court. Okay, so that's the trust. A common question I'll get, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but people often ask about irrevocable trust. So there are a whole swath of irrevocable trust that you can set up. I will say 99% of the time it's not appropriate for most people. It's usually only high net worth clients, so people that are upwards of $30-40 million that we're dealing with that. So most people don't have that issue, unfortunately. But if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer later. So that's the trust. Like I said, that's the main document. Another common question is the difference between a trust and a will, right? So I mentioned that if you pass away with no documentation in place, you end up in probate court. Common misconception is I have a will, right? And the will does allow you to say, here's who's in charge of handling things, and here's where my assets go. So it sounds like you're accomplishing the same thing, right? But with a simple will, unless you're under a certain value threshold, which we can talk about in detail later, you still end up going to probate court. So even though I filled out this will, I signed it and said, here's who's in charge, and I wanted equal shares to the kids, you still have to submit that will to court, and the court is the one that gets to decide, is this appropriate, the process in which you handle it, and we still pay all those fees and all that time in probate court. So the will has a place in a full estate plan, but it really should only be used as a backup to the trust. And basically in a trust plan, the will is called a pour over will. And basically what it says is, okay, hey, we set up this trust. We wanted everything properly titled in the trust and to ensure that we stay out of the probate court system. But just in case we left anything out, please pour those assets into the trust and allow my trustee to take it from there. So it really just acts as a backup in case something's left out. And oftentimes that's when I'm working with the real estate agents and the financial advisors is, again, we want everything owned in your trust. So I'm usually working with Corban to say, hey, any brokerage accounts, let's put them into the trust. Hey, if we're buying a new piece of real estate, let's make sure that goes into the trust, right? The will comes into play when people forget to communicate with the three of us and they go buy a piece of property, but they didn't tell Owen that they have a trust, right? Or they open up an investment account and they don't tell them they had a trust. So the will acts as that backup document to swing everything together at the end of the day. The only other main thing the will does is it does deal with guardianship of minor kids. So if you have kids that are under age 18, if you want to make sure that you get to control who takes care of them if something were to happen to you before they turn age 18, the will is the vehicle in which we do that. And so I often get that. I want to make sure my sister-in-law doesn't get my kids or whatever the case may be. That's the vehicle in which we do it there. And then the last two are kind of supplemental documents that go along with the plan. But I will say there are very few scenarios when people don't have any real estate and don't have a whole lot of cash or investment assets. And even in those scenarios, it's still important to have these two documents. So even if we don't need the trust and the will as part of a plan, maybe you have an elderly parent that they've sold everything and given everything away, right? They should still have these plans, and everyone should have these documents as part of their plan. So the first one is called a durable power of attorney, also known as a financial power of attorney. And basically it says, hey, here's the parties that I appoint to make financial decisions on my behalf, right? It coincides with the trust. So usually the parties in charge of the trust are the same parties in charge of your financial power of attorney. And it allows you to say, hey, if I become incapacitated, this person can go to the bank and pay my bills or talk with Social Security or talk with my advisor or my real estate agent, etc. So that's the financial power. And then the last one is your advanced healthcare directive. So again, being able to say, hey, if I can't make my own healthcare decisions, and I'm in the hospital and I'm incapacitated, these are the parties that get to make those decisions for me, right? And then you can kind of clarify your expectations in those types of decisions. So end of life care, do I want to be left on life support versus not? Do I want to be an organ donor, cremation-based burial, right? All those different types of healthcare decisions, you can control them as long as you write them down in your healthcare directive. Okay? So there's a lot of information about the planning documents, and I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end about specifics there. But I'll touch on real quick some common pitfalls in the estate planning process. So number one, pretty self-explanatory, and we've talked about this quite a bit, but not having a plan is the biggest problem, right? If you don't have a plan, you don't have any say in who's in charge or where things go or the cost and time associated with it. Number two is not updating your plan or not funding your trust. And basically, when I finish a trust plan with clients and everything gets signed, I love when I know who their advisors or their agents or their CPAs are, because we can all communicate and I can directly email Corban and say, hey, just set up this trust for these mutual clients, make sure that these accounts are updated in this way. So making sure that you update your plan, I usually say every 5 years or so, you should pull out your plan and see, well, who did I appoint in charge, right? Do I still want my brother on there, or should my kid who's 30 now be the person in charge, right? So those types of updates should happen every couple years. Number three, so this is getting more and more prominent because there are a lot of online services that provide estate planning, right? There's a lot of new ones out there, and so people often ask me, well, why don't I just do it on my own? It's better than not having anything, I will say, right? But I will say the most common times that I have to go to court. So my goal is to do the plan so that we don't have to deal with the court system, right? I don't want to go to probate court because it means something went wrong. But usually the reason why I do is because either they used DIY estate planning or they did it online, they printed it out, and they missed some legal requirement, right? Yeah.
We were just at a party, and there was a guy who came up to Corban and said, what did he tell you, Corban?
We were talking, he was asking about financial planning,
Mm-hmm.
and I had asked him, he just had a baby. And I said, oh, great, do you and your wife have a trust? And he said, well, actually, I used ChatGPT to create a trust, but it got rejected from the first. They want me to pay to have them updated.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see that being
Yep.
the next.
Yeah, so I'm getting a lot of questions. I ran through ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it may be. But yeah, I will say, obviously, there are programs out there that are good so long as you understand what you're supposed to be doing, right? But ultimately, the most common times that I'm in court is because someone tried to do it themselves, they messed up on something, and now they're paying double because they paid that service to do it, and they're also paying me to fix it, and it's going to be 10 times as much, right? Then number four, this kind of goes in line with what Corban was talking about, is not having your beneficiary designations updated. So when we talk about an estate plan in totality, I do the trust in the estate planning process and make sure that your real estate is updated and that your accounts are updated and everything that you own, right? But there are some specialty assets like life insurance and retirement, which are guided by beneficiary designations. So that's kind of Corban's realm. Now, normally when I work with the advisor, I tell them, make sure to update their life insurance and retirement, and we talk about how to do that. But if you don't do that, you can end up in probate court with a retirement account that doesn't have a beneficiary or a life insurance policy that doesn't have a beneficiary. Last couple here. Number five is picking the wrong people. So I oftentimes get people that come in and they're like, well, who should I appoint? I'm just going to appoint my oldest child because they'll be upset if I don't appoint them. And I'm like, okay, well, are they financially savvy? Oh, well, no, they have a gambling addiction, right? Well, probably shouldn't appoint those people. And so it's choosing the best person that's going to help you during your lifetime and then ultimately be best for the next generation. And so we sometimes have to have some of those tough conversations. Six would be poor document storage. So I oftentimes have people come in that said, I did a trust 20 years ago, but I don't know where it's at, right? That's unfortunate because now we have to redo it. So our firm here in Sloan, Santa Maria, Andre Morrison Butcher, I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but we hold original documents for clients. We provide copies to the clients, right? And they can get their originals if they ever need them. But we hold them in our vault so that we make sure that you're not going to end up passing away with no planning documents in place, right? If you're paying for it, we want to make sure that it's there at the end of the day to use. I talked about this briefly at the beginning, but when your child turns 18, you lose some rights as a parent, right, to have access to certain financial and healthcare related information. So sometimes that's something that people want to talk about is, hey, I want to make sure that I can still talk with my child's doctor or what have you. Then finally, oftentimes, especially when people get older, they oftentimes just add their kids on to bank accounts to have this ease of transition. Hey, the kid's helping me pay the bills and things of that nature, right? That can be very beneficial and useful in certain scenarios, but there's risk associated with it. If the kid has creditor issues and you add them to a bank account, right, now those creditors can come after those assets. So there are risks and rewards to those types of decisions. And so I usually recommend before you change title to a piece of property and add a kid on there, right, there's tax issues with doing that. Make sure you come talk to me beforehand, and then we can make sure that you're making the proper decision there. So last couple of slides here are basically, okay, we've talked about what a trust and the estate planning documents are, but how do we go about going through this process, right? And so My goal as an estate planning attorney is really trying to make this as easy as possible on clients, right? Most people don't like to come in and talk about death and things of that nature. So I'm trying to make it as easy as possible on you guys. And so basically reach out to an estate planning attorney, right? So either me or I can refer you to somebody else if you're interested. Step 2 would be setting up a conference to talk about the specifics, right? So everyone's scenario is different, right? Kids have different issues, maybe mixed families, all those types of things, right? And we can talk about how those all relate to your specific plan. Once we've talked about that and kind of decided on the route you guys want to go with your specific estate plan, so basically I prepare all the documentation, I send it to you guys for review. So you will go over it to make sure that everything matches what our initial conversation was. And then finally, we'll do one final conference where we'll sit down, go through the documents together, make sure you understand everything, right? And then ultimately get them signed and notarized and have everything final there. So it's a fairly simple process, but it's oftentimes scary for people. So if you have any questions at all about the process, please let me know. So last slide here before the Q&A is kind of the most common questions when people ask about estate planning, which is how much does it cost, right? That's almost the most common question there. So it depends on ultimately the complexity of your specific scenario, right? So if you're a single individual, I say usually plans are $1,500 to $2,500. If you have 20 rental properties, it's going to be a different plan than if you have one single house and some bank accounts, right? But that's a pretty good range there. A married couple's about double that, right? 3,000 to 5,000 for an estate plan. And that includes your trust, your will, your healthcare powers for each of you, financial powers for each of you, and then what we call the trust funding. So deeds of transferring properties into the trust, getting your businesses and all those types of documentation to make sure it's all put into the trust properly. Second one is how often should I review my estate plan? So my recommendation to clients is every 3 to 5 years, you should pull it out and just see, do I still want these people in charge? Do I still want these assets going to these people? And ultimately, are there any major life decisions that have happened, right? Divorce, death in the family, all those types of things kind of should red flag you of, hey, maybe I should pull this out and see if anything has changed and reach out to COP, okay? I'll touch on this briefly because people always ask about inheritance tax. I will say, number one, California has no inheritance tax, so it's an easy answer there. There is a federal inheritance tax, which is called the estate tax. But right now, basically, the exemption is you can transfer tax-free to your beneficiaries. If you're a single individual, about 15 million. If you're a married couple, it's 30 million. So again, a lot of people don't have those issues. If you do, please come talk to me. So last but not least, I think this will open this up to the three of us, is if anyone has any specific questions about the real estate, financial planning, or the estate planning process.
What states do have an inheritance tax?
There are quite a few, but usually it's offset with like lower property tax. So like Florida, they have no property tax rate, but they have an estate tax. So it basically balances out depending on the tax scenario. The government gets their money one way or the other, of course. Any other specific questions? Yeah.
You talked about naming beneficiaries. Can you name a trust as a beneficiary? And is there ever a situation where you can't?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So short answer, yes, you can name the trust as a beneficiary. There are pros and cons to doing it depending on what style of account you have. So generally speaking, I'll just give you kind of the most common scenario, right? Married couple, maybe they have, well, I'll give you two. Married couple with adult children, right? Most common scenario is you want to list your beneficiaries as your spouse as your primary and then your kids as your secondary, right? Assuming that you want your kids to inherit those assets. There are some tax benefits to listing individuals over a trust, which is why if we have adult beneficiaries, just list the kids themselves and don't put the trust. The only time I usually have trust on retirement accounts is either we have minor kids and we don't want a 5-year-old to inherit a $250,000 401k, right? Or there are other issues like we have creditor issues or special needs trust. So a kid that we need to make sure they apply for Medi-Cal or Social Security, things of that nature. Then we would have the trust as the beneficiary. That way those assets are managed for those children, but not directly inherited by them. Yeah, so short answer is yes, you can. And I will say too, on the life insurance side, a little bit different. I usually do have the trust as the backup beneficiary on life insurance plans because there's no tax difference there. the funds can flow into the trust, and then whoever's in charge can manage those assets from there. Yeah. And sorry, I'll add a third point. Oftentimes, especially for life insurance, if you do have the trust as the beneficiary, it's helpful because if you update your trust and you change the beneficiaries within your trust, well, the life insurance is automatically changed, right? Because you have the trust as the beneficiary, your beneficiaries change, and you don't have to then update both sides. Yeah. Any other questions?
Does the trust ever expire?
Yes. So basically, most revocable trusts are set up in a way that says, hey, this trust is set up and it's there for my lifetime, right? But it has beneficiaries when I pass. So it usually will say, hey, these assets are held for my benefit. Upon my passing, it goes out to the kids, right? So the trust terminates upon my death and the assets are split into whatever shares you indicate. It can extend past your lifetime if there are reasons why. So a common one is a child with special needs, right? We don't want that kid who has Down syndrome or something like that to inherit a whole bunch of cash. We want it managed for that child's lifetime as well. So you can have it extend past your lifetime, but there are pros and cons to doing so, right? But most trusts end when you pass and it's distributed out to the next generation. Yeah.
It's very helpful that you had that cost slide earlier. I assume that's the upfront cost of setting things up, right?
Mhm.
But, we also, recommend that you review it and update every 5 years or something like that.
Yep.
What is the cost of that service?
Yeah, so some attorneys will, I will say, be wary if someone sets like an annual fee as an attorney or as an estate planning attorney, because most people don't need to update their plan every year, right? A vast majority of clients, they will set their plan and it will stay that way for 10, 20 years, right? With maybe some small changes on who's in charge. But basically, I charge hourly, right? So however, let's say 5 years from now, we meet to update your plan, right? And you have a small update, you're just going to change it. You had your brother in charge, now you're going to list your son, right? It's a very simple change. It's going to be, maybe a couple $100 to update that change, right? Now, if you come in and you say, I want to scrap everything and I want new parties in charge and different distribution plan and I have a whole new set of assets, now obviously that price is going to be higher, right? So ultimately it depends on the hourly, how long it takes me to do. But yeah, most simple changes, it's $500 to do an update every 5 years or what have you. It just depends on complexity there.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have any changes, we wouldn't need to come see.
No. So like I said, most people, if you have adult kids and everything's going to go to those specific kids, right? You can set a plan up and you won't have to update it at any point in time. Now, I usually still recommend you review it. And oftentimes this is where the financial advisors are great because they will pull it out and say, okay, hey, let's make sure all your accounts are updated. Let's make sure your beneficiaries are updated, right? And they do that as part of their kind of annual review, which is a great service that Corban and I have talked about. But you're correct. You don't have to pay any annual fee, at least through my firm, for just if you're not going to update things.
And Corban, how much do you charge for financial planning?
It really varies. We have different models. Some we've been exploring just flat fee financial planning for some people. We found that to be really successful and be a way that some individuals have preferred just knowing what a flat fee looks like. I think those engagements vary based off of the scope too. I would say some traditional financial planning usually charges a percentage of assets under management. I think that is beneficial for certain individuals, but if you have a couple million assets under management, that may not be the most cost-effective path for you as well. So I would say typically, we kind of explore those different models with which each person that we meet with, and we see what works best for them, and ultimately what's going to be what they're looking for too. Because I think the traditional assets under management fee, I think it is changing over time too. And I think advisors are really wanting to provide year-round service with more transparent costs that don't have just that traditional AUM fee. that's built in there too. So I think the short answer is it kind of varies, but we have different we have different options. So some is that traditional AUM, assets under management fee, some is just flat fee financial planning as well. And usually that ranges depending on the case, somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000, I would say, around annually, generally.
Any final thoughts or questions?
Which one's more important? The
Oh, man, it's all important. Well, in closing, I'd say it's a team sport. Wealth building is a team sport. So who's on your team? You need to choose your A players. You do need to have a financial plan in place. You do need to have an estate plan in place. You do need to have a real estate plan in place. Like, how am I going to buy a home, build wealth? And so contacting people that you know and trust who have like reputable a track record of success, someone who can do a good job for you is what we recommend you do. And if you want to set up a meeting with any of us, we'd be happy to connect with you afterwards for a free consultation to talk to you about what your goals are and how you can build wealth. And so in closing, I'd say just reach out and we'd love to set up that individual consultation to help you guys on your next step toward building wealth.